All right. Well, good morning, and thank you everybody for joining today in this office hour to discuss updated practices in ATCAP 50. Just a quick background and introduction here. We had kicked off the rule revision process for ATCAP 50 back in 2021, and we're excited to have recently wrapped up the rule revision with some of the new and updated practices. The goal here is to, with the rule revision, really was to try and create some more tools at the county's disposal to address priorities and local resource concerns. This was a concept we had heard pretty strong support for during the series of partner meetings that we had held with the counties back in fall of 2020 to talk about nutrient management and potential new practices within the rule. So I will say these are some very exciting but significant changes in how we've typically delivered swarm cost share for conservation practices in the past. I will say too, we may not have all the answers yet today. I think both DATCAP and the counties will be doing some learning together as we go through this a bit. But really, the goal today is to try and capture some of your questions and then any concerns that you have related to practice implementation so that we can put out the most helpful resources possible for you. So with that, I will kick it over to Haley, I believe, is going to talk about some of the web resources next.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is our DATCAP homepage. We are specifically going to talk about the information provided by Land and Water. We have the ATCAP 50 rule revision, which you're probably all familiar with and are interested in me telling you something you don't already know. But there's a general overview, which ATCAP 50 is our guiding principle, and then the updates and the revisions. So this is just the timeline and the revisions, but this is more our hub. So you can get here, and all these buttons over on the right have the information that relate to the update, the practice specific information, and the frequently asked questions. We will start with the frequently asked questions. It does open new tabs, so you can always go back to where you were. And then these buttons over here should kind of get you where you need to go. So hopefully it's really easy to navigate. You can get around and find the information that you're looking for. So here, just the general frequently asked questions. Why did the rule change? Did the revision change practices? And you can scroll down and look at those. We reference this practice-specific information frequently throughout the FAQ. And we also have a button here for you. So we'll talk about this specifically since there is a ton of information on here. This is going to give you pretty much everything you're looking for. And if you can't answer a question in here, there is a who can I contact page over here. So hopefully plenty of resources. And if we don't answer your questions on the webpage, you can reach out to the person that is able to help you. So here up on top, we explain the rule revision, and these are all hyperlinked to information down below. So if you're curious, what was the definition? What's that definition for housing? So you can click that. You can read the definition specifically for animal housing. Okay, I get it. Go back to the top of the page. So it should be quick and easy to navigate. You can check out new practice information or just updated practices. Cover crops we can take a look at. You go down to cover crops. It does go right to the very top. So it'll be sitting right at the very top of your page there, but it will directly link you to that cover crop information. They're all set up roughly the same. There's a definition, rates, and then the considerations for implementation, monitoring, and maintenance. The new practices have a little bit more information. We do include, what swarm is covering and goals of the practice with some of the new practices. So I was just going to give a brief overview about that. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, we can move on to the next topic.
All right, thank you, Haley. Next, Randy's going to talk a little bit about the practices and how these fit into soil health systems and planning.
Thanks, Mark. Can you see my screen here? Looks like it's sharing. Excellent. So, as Mark pointed out, I'm going to talk just a little bit how these practices all fit into a soil health mindset. Soil health itself is not actually a practice, but all these practices go to this idea of changing how we see things and thinking about the world in a systematic way. We've adopted the 5 principle model of soil health at DACCAP, and what that means is that the soil is a vital living ecosystem, and soil health builds back our capacity for the soil to function properly and give us the functions that a soil would do. Each of the practices fits in it in a different way, and we'll take a look with each practice as they come up how that fits in to this. But as you're working with producers and you're working with people and they come in and ask for these practices, remember that this is how they fit into this system is really vital and how we build back the soil health component. I think that's all I had for this particular one. We'll talk more about them as we go through, Mark, but I will point out if you have any questions on soil health, I'll drop in the chat. This is a flyer that is the same as our soil health webpage, and then on our soil health webpage is also linked an introduction to soil health training that we developed with nutrient and pest management earlier this year that was released. So I'll drop those 2 links into the chat for you, and I'll be here throughout if you have any questions and want to come back to it.
Great, thank you, Randy. If there's no questions for Randy, then we'll move on to Cody to talk a bit about some of the technical aspects of the new practice or the updated practices.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so we're going to jump right to nutrient management. In 2 weeks, we'll have the cover crop one specifically, so keep that in mind. I'm just going to go briefly over some of the technical changes to these practices, and then I believe Susan will come in and talk a little bit more about the contracting after that. So just considerations for nutrient management. So it's still $10 an acre, but we will be providing $5 per acre for those Silurian updates. But keep in mind too that we won't be providing that, I believe, until version 3 of SNAP Plus is updated. So that'll be sometime later, I believe next year. If you've attended any of our nutrient management roadshows, we're talking about having version 3 be accessible and ready for the 2026 cropping season. So that is when I believe we'll talk about, is cost share available for Silurian updates specifically to your nutrient management plans. So I'm just going to reference the information that's on that page. For prescribed grazing, some of the new technical kind of things, we're allowing cost share for enhancing those existing prescribed grazing systems. So if you need to go in and do weed management, herbaceous or woody invasive species control, or do any kind of interseeding to renovate a pasture, that is now allowed for prescribed grazing. There's some increased options for watering facilities and things like that. So if you want more specifics on that, you can click on that ATCP 50 link there, and it'll take you right to the page in ATCP 50 for what some of those additional allowances are. For residue management, we're no longer allowing chisel plowing or disking or any kind of intensive tillage for residue management. It's strictly back down to no-till, in strip till, or any other similar practice that you can meet that STIR value of 20 or less for no-till. No-till and strip till in the past were basically the same practice, so it's still that STIR value. Functionally in Russell 2, it's that STIR value of 20 or less that you're looking for if you're going to contract residue management. There weren't any other technical updates for riparian buffers, and then there are, I'm not sure about subsurface drains, what actually was added to that. I can let Matt or any of the engineers kind of go into detail on what that was included in there, but basically adding some feed storage runoff control systems, and then we have the nutrient treatment systems that allow subsurface drains to be contracted along with that. So if you guys have any technical questions about some of these practices, more so the agronomic kind of practices, you can reach out to me. Or if you have any questions on like the more engineering or structural practices, reach out to your technicians, or someone like Matt Woodrow or Bart. So with that, I can pass it off to Susan.
Good morning, everyone. For these enhanced practices, I'll call them, for the update to 50, there aren't that many changes in terms of contracting. The one thing I want to point out is the nutrient management change, the addition of the $5 per acre one-time payment for updating existing nutrient management plans cannot be combined with the $10 per acre for 4 years to create a nutrient management plan. Those are two separate things. If it's a brand new plan, it's $10 an acre. If it's an update due to the Silurian issues, it's a $5 per acre one-time payment. Both require, as they always have, a nutrient management checklist at reimbursement. Just realized I don't have my camera on. That makes a big difference in anyone's life. Prescribed grazing, residue management, riparian buffers, subsurface drains, there have really been no changes in terms of the contracting for any of those practices. The two bond ones, riparian buffers and subsurface drains, potentially could be eligible to use seg funds on if they are part of implementing a nutrient management plan that requires pre-approval from DATCP. That has not changed either, but just thought I'd point it out. So we're kind of quick on our end today, Mark. I guess we're going to open for questions now.
Yeah, thank you, Cody and Susan. Yeah, we wanted to leave ample time for any folks that have questions today. I will say one of the things I did forget to lead with is this is just the first in a series of meetings as well. So we do have a number of upcoming office hours on individual new practices as well.
I just added into the chat the link directly to the project-specific updates on our webpage.
Excellent, thank you. Cody and Susan and Haley, could you also put your email addresses perhaps into the chat too, please? Just thinking, just in case folks do have any questions that come to them later, if they'd like to reach out at that time. But we got a question in the chat from Amy in Dane County. Amy's asking, for said cost share funds, is there still limits on how much can be used for supporting practices versus how much is for nutrient management? Susan, you are on mute.
Thank you. No, Amy, there's not. Looking back at our application process for SWARM last year, we removed that requirement in order to give counties more flexibility. We do, however, require nutrient management checklist for all cropping practices. So the nutrient management plan must be in place before we're going to be able to cost share on the cropping practices. But no, there's no limit on how much of your said cost share funds can be used to support nutrient management.
Any other questions?
Or concerns.
Or concerns? I think one thing we've done too in past office hours is just stay on for a while afterwards too. So if folks feel like they have the information they need, you're certainly welcome to pop off, but we can also stay on some of the DATCP staff here for another 10-15 minutes as well if folks wanted to have any side conversations or ask questions in a perhaps smaller format as well.
So I have a question here. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Good. The new version of Snap Plus, is it V3, projected to be available in 2026? I think there's been some discussions about that. And then I think Cody had mentioned that's when some of the new nutrient management cost share dollars will become available. Not until that happens. Will ADCAP 50 have to be reopened? And will that rule have to be modified before that cost share is then available, or how will that work? Because I'm assuming because the federal standard for nutrient management is being updated right now, if I'm not mistaken, in the new version of Snap Plus, the V3 is to, I think, help address some of that. So then will it come back to the state? And will the state need to open the rule and make those changes before the cost share dollars will become available? I'm assuming it will.
So those are kind of separate issues. So version 3 right now is only following the 2015 version of 590. What NRCS is trying to do is have a version of 590 updated and available for NRCS programs in October of next year. That, like you said, that'll still require us to open ATCAP 50. It'll require DNR to open NR 151 and possibly 243 to make those updates to the newer version. However, what Snap Plus is doing too is they're going to be incorporating the new version of 590 sometime after that date. So there's still a lot of unknowns on like timelines for the new version of 590, but currently the current version of Snap Plus does allow some Silurian checks, primarily for CAFOs. The purpose of version 3 is to get those checks to all farms. So all the kind of compliance checks will be applied to all farms rather than just CAFOs. So keep in mind that those are separate. The 590 revision is, we won't be cost sharing like the new 590 until whenever we can open ATCAP 50 in 3 or 4 years. So
yeah. So that was, I guess, my point. I mean, some of these other things hope to be in place in 2026, which is, I think, what you mentioned, Cody. But the reality is, until some of it get cost shared, it's probably going to be 27, 28, 20, something like there, out another year or two after that. Is that fair enough?
Well, so for Silurian specifically, we have a compliance date of, oh God, I should go and look and remind myself what the date is. It's 2027, like April of 2027 or May of 2027 is the compliance deadline for farmland preservation participants. So we're giving them like 2 or 3 cropping seasons to get that update going, but then it's going to be harder because the reason why we pushed it out is because we needed Snap Plus to be updated to give them the ability to do like check for compliance in there. So they can start updating, they can start using version 3 for some of that. And we've talked with Snap Plus, they can turn on some of those compliance checks for version 2. It just won't be as complete as like version 3 will be for Silurian. So there's some things that we need to talk about on like what is acceptable, like to what level do you need to update your nutrient management plan, existing nutrient management plan, to like get that $5 an acre. So
I did want to share, this was the document Katie Smith had sent out to everybody ahead of the meeting here. But I saw Melissa's question about when the cover crop office hour is. That's going to be Tuesday, September 17th. So next week, that's when we'll be covering cover crops. We know there's some questions on that one. Monday, October 7th, we'll be discussing the habitat diversification and conservation cover. So some of our more grassland practices. October 15th, crop rotations, conservation crop rotation. Tuesday, October 29th, harvestable buffers. And then Tuesday, November 12th, Randy will be covering kind of thinking about all of these new practices through a soil health lens. And folks from the Swarm team, do we know, did this get posted to the web as well? Is this on the ATCAP 50 website? Or was this just mailed to the counties via
Just-
email?
To my knowledge, just mailed. I haven't published it to the website. I can though.
So I'll ask another question as a follow-up to Amy's question in Dane County, to Susan. Just so I have it clear in my head, you said that coming up this next year, our SEG funds can be used for all supporting practices as they support the nutrient management plan, provided the checklist is submitted. Could you, and I assume there'll be more correspondence coming out regarding that for counties here. Can you just refresh our memory as to what all those supporting practices are, and maybe a couple scenarios as to like what some counties could do or might do starting next year then through those supporting practices?
That's a very good question. This is a change that actually, it might have been in place in 2024. So this is not new. We have slowly been chipping away at the percent of the SEG budget, which can be used, or SEG allocation, which can be used for supporting practices. Any practice that is put in place that is in support of a nutrient management plan. So that would include most of the cropping practices, cover crops, the tillage, prescribed grazing, even riparian buffers, waterways, to some extent. A lot of these will require, all of them, well, no. Anything that is typically a structural practice funded by bond in the past and now GPR does require pre-approval from DATCAP to be able to use those funds. I need to pull up 2.2 real quick. On the SWARM webpage, there is a link to a document under section 2, policies and procedures, cost share funding source table. I will share my screen. Is that sharing?
Yep.
Yes, good, thank you. The ones that are highlighted in green on here are typically bond practices that can be used with SEG funds. SEG funds can be used to fund with pre-approval. So that includes riparian buffers, fencing and establishment as part of prescribed grazing, windbreaks, filter strips, diversions, manure closure, manure storage, creation. If you have an argument for anything that's not highlighted in green, we're happy to talk to you about that as well. Does that help?
Any other questions out there?
I just dropped a link to that document into the chat as well.
Thank you, Susan. Excellent. Well, if there's no other questions, we can let folks get on with their days. Definitely appreciate the time dropping in. Again, our next office hour will be next Tuesday, September 17th. That will be the cover crop topic, which I know is one folks do have some questions on. So hopefully we'll see some of you again next week. Again, some of the DATCAP staff can stay on for another 5 to 10 minutes if folks would like to stay on, ask any other questions. If you have questions irrelevant to ATCAP 50, we're happy to chat with you about that as well. Otherwise, we will let you get on with your day, and thank you for your time.
One quick note, if you have any questions about cover crops, send them to us beforehand so we can make sure to cover everything in next week's webinar.
Good point. Thank you, Susan. Fantastic. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thanks.